Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a Styx album ranking. The band itself has been around since 1961, so 64 years that they've been kicking around, at least since they did their first jam. They released their first album 53 years ago, have 18 studio albums, and with the release of their brand new album, Circling from Above, I thought it was finally time to do a full album ranking for the band. All the studio albums, not going to cover the live ones, but join me as I run through all 18 studio albums from Styx. We'll get into it here in just a bit, but if you are new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things like this with a Styx album ranking. So as I said, 18 studio albums, so let's dive right into it. We're going to kick off here at number 18 with Styx 1 from 1972. And I myself have the wooden nickel complete recordings. So I've got all four of their first albums this way, but I don't have the individual albums. So you're going to be seeing the album pop up the way that it did just there. And so debut studio album. Now, in my opinion, this one here is a solid effort, but it doesn't really have their signature sound. And for me at least, it would come a lot later. This album I don't go back to all that often because it never really clicked with me due to not having that signature sound. So that is at least the reason why this one is coming in last place. All right, coming in at 17, Cyclorama from 2003. 14th studio album. This one here, first without founding member Dennis DeYoung, taking over as Lawrence Gowan in his place. We also have a returning Glenn Burtnick coming in, though he played guitar and keyboards before on Edge of a Century in 1990. He now comes in as bassist for this album. And for me, this one here doesn't really have a solid identity to it. Gone are the theatrics that Dennis DeYoung really brought to it. And what I would have thought would have been more of a return to the rockin' format that both James Young and Tommy Shaw really helped move for them in the 1970s. We don't really get that. We get a lot more of the modern sounding contemporary sounds of the day, like pop punk, and we get outside singers like Billy Bob Thornton coming in on here, and it just kind of feels like an overall hodgepodge for me, which sort of made this album as a disappointment and why it comes in where it does. Right, coming in at number 16, Brave New World from 1999, their 13th studio album. It was a reunion album. It had the classic lineup, so the return of Tommy Shaw after he took the break to go and do the damn Yankees. This would also be the last album that Dennis DeYoung did with the band. The album itself is interesting. I enjoyed it at the time that it came out, but I always felt it was trying to be too relevant or trying too hard to be relevant, mixing in the modern sounds of the day, which, like I said, worked at the time, but now the album just feels dated. I don't return to it a lot. It kind of seems out of place, again, like they're trying too hard on things. So I rarely go back to it, and why it ranks as low as it does in the countdown, for me at least. Now, normally an album like this one here would have actually been in last place, but this one here is ranking a lot higher for me. Number 15, The Big Bang Theory from 2005, 15th studio album featuring 14 cover songs. And that's the reason this one normally would come in last place. Anytime a band is doing cover songs, not their original material, I usually rank it last because I'm a fan of the band. I want to hear what the band does, not covering other things. Though this one here actually is very interesting because these classic 60s style songs that they're doing, they very well make their own, putting their own spin on it. There's actually a re-recording of one of their own songs on here, Blue Collar Man. But I found this one to be really fascinating, and I've enjoyed it for quite some time, more so than I do usually with cover albums. Favorite track on here, It Don't Make Sense, which is a James Young song, was the one that really jumped out and grabbed me when I first heard this thing, realizing we weren't just going to get straight copies of things, that we were going to get Styx sounding styles or variations on the original songs themselves. So this one here ranking higher than I would have thought it would for me when I got into putting all of this together. All right, coming in at number 14, Edge of the Century from 1990, their 12th studio album. Reunion album minus Tommy Shaw, though, because, of course, he was off with the damn Yankees at this point. So taking his place was Glenn Burtnick, who, of course, would later rejoin the band again for Cyclorama. On here, he's playing guitar and keys, doing what Tommy Shaw did. Of course, later on, he's playing bass. But this one here, for me at least, really, for me, I feel the absence of Tommy Shaw on this album. It's basically a Dennis DeYoung solo album. Now, I really love the song Show Me the Way, which went all the way to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. And you would have thought that it would have pushed this album much further and made it a much greater album in people's minds. But unfortunately, the album didn't sell all that well. And it sort of fell by the wayside. But I think that has to do with the rest of the songs on the album not really having a full cohesive vibe to it the way that it could have had, and not having as much variety within it as we usually get from Styx albums, therefore making it one that, again, I don't go back to all that often, as I move forward in the Styx catalog. Now, coming in at 13 is their latest album, Circling from Above, so 2025 release. Interesting in that the day they announced this on May 30th, it immediately went up for sale from their website or live at their concerts, but July 18th, I believe it is the worldwide release of this, where you'll be able to go get it from places like Amazon and your local record store. So if you don't have it already, that's when you can get it. Otherwise, head over to the band's website. I've also done a full review of this. You can check the link in the description if you want to know more about it. But this one here has 2 brand new members coming in. We got Will Ivankovich coming in on guitar and keys, and he's been kicking around with the band on their last 2 albums, but not an official member. And we have Terry Gowan on bass taking over for Ricky Phillips. So 2 new guys coming in on this. It's a concept album, as a lot of Styx albums are. This one here exploring the intersection between technology and nature. And it's got an avian theme with birds and flight and satellites and stuff like that. All in all, very interesting album. It's got some good standout tracks on it. Build and Destroy, the first single, probably the best song on here. I really like the third track, Michigan, and fourth one, King of Love, which is a James Young sung song on here. But I have noticed that the first side, much better than the second side. It really falls off after that. And so unfortunately, doesn't really hold up overall, which is why it's not placing as high as some of their later albums that you'll see later on in the countdown for me. Okay. Coming in at number 12, Styx 2 from 1973. This is their second studio album and first album for me that really has that Styx sound to it. It's a very strong album and opens up with the killer You Need Love on here. And it's got arguably the first power ballad ever on it, the song Lady, which would take 2 years but eventually climbed to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. And the album for me, it falls off a bit towards the end, which is again why it doesn't maybe rank as high, but it's still a very strong album, helping it to come in at number 12. All right, number 11, The Serpent is Rising, 1973, their third studio album. This one here released a surprisingly 3 months after Styx 2. So they don't really give Styx 2 a very long time for the public to get a hold of this thing before releasing this one. And remember, Lady hadn't become a hit yet. It didn't do that for a full 2 years on after its release. But the album itself starting to show some real growth for the band. And the band, I think, had found their signature sound, not only on the last album, but really on this one here. It's got all the hallmarks that make Styx what they are. So while there's no big hits off of this one, like the last one having Lady, this one here is a really solid, strong album from start to finish. And I just think that it's got some really, really cool standout tracks on it. Again, even though they're not the big hits, my favorite one off here is Witch Wolf. All right, coming in at number 10, Kilroy Was Here from 1983, 11th studio album and final album until the band reunited in 1990 from Edge of a Century. So this one here being a concept album featuring a rock opera where music has been outlawed and there's an uprising against it. And, you know, maybe Styx were the first to do it, but I have heard that concept so many times over that it's a little tiresome. And so maybe me coming into Styx later on, because I'm younger than most people that grew up with them in the 70s, I sort of felt that concept was tired. And I think part of the reason I've never really fully clicked with this album, though it's got arguably their most well-known song on here, Mr. Roboto. That one in and of itself, fantastic, but I don't think the album holds up as well as at least that one song does on here. It's very much of the times of the 80s, but feeling a bit dated, and so I don't return to this one all that often. Okay, next up, coming in at number 9, The Mission from 2017, 16th studio album and first one for them in 12 long years since The Big Bang Theory, the covers album of 2005. So there was a lot riding on this album when it came out at the time, and for me at least, it did not disappoint. It's a concept album about mission to Mars. The story was written by Tommy Shaw and future Styx member Will Ivankovich. So he goes back to this album here. He does work on the follow-up album, and then of course becoming a full-time member from Circling From Above. But the combination of a current topic like space, which is all the rage right now, and having a classic sound like they did in the 70s, and I think also being the 12-year wait on it and, you know, bit of nostalgia and everything thrown in on this album here, really has it hitting a high note for me. Also, Lawrence Gowan, I think, has settled in very nicely to the band. No longer is he just a replacement member taking over for Dennis DeYoung. And while he doesn't do the same things that Dennis did or brought to the band, he's brought his own things. And I think he really shines on this album here and has going forward and really, really cemented his place for the band. And so this one here, been now 8 years since it's come out, and I still reach for this album, which is one of the reasons it is ranking so high in the overall countdown today. Okay, coming in at number 8, Man of Miracles from 1974, the 4th studio album from Styx. This is the last of the independently released albums that they did on the Wooden Nickel label. Remember, I held this up at the beginning, showing you the complete Wooden Nickel recording. So that's where they were before they left to go on to A&M Records. And definitely the best of the first 4 studio albums, in my opinion. And this one here just goes from strength to strength on it. It's probably also the most rockin' of those early albums. And yet at the same time, still completely sounding like Styx and having all the hallmarks in place, the things that not only was making them who they are at that time, but continue to be shown as who the band is over the time. So while it is one of those early albums and doesn't really have any big major hits on it, everything was already in place for this album, and it's a fantastic one. One of my favorite tracks on this album, Golden Lark, but it is one of those albums that I could pretty much pick any track off of and would enjoy this album. All right, coming in at number 7, Cornerstone from 1979, 9th studio album, third straight platinum selling album in a row for the band, at least at the time. That was a big deal back then. One of the first bands to do that. They were one of the first bands to do multi-platinum sale albums in a row, having big major hits on this one, like Babe went to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Why Me was a top 40 at number 26. And a classic song, even though it didn't chart, Boat on the River is one that they've continued to play live and have a presence from the band. And so this album here was a real transitional sort of album for the band. They emphasized their pop side more than their progressive side. And obviously it paid off having the song Babe go to #1. But while I do like this album, it's not as strong as other albums for just that reason of being a transitional style album and leaning more towards pop. Okay, coming in at #6, Equinox. 1975, fifth studio album. This was the last to feature guitar player Kurlinski. I apologize if I butchered his name. That's the best I know how to say it. Before Tommy Shaw came in to take over. It does feature the standout hit Lorelei on it, which went to number 27 on the Billboard Hot 100. So a top 40 hit off of this one. But everything else on here is pretty much deep cut. But those deep cuts really have helped elevate this album, in my opinion. And granted, I am coming at this, as I said, from a different perspective. I was not around at the time the album came out, so just in listening to it when I first came across the album, felt very big and had a lot of high water marks for me, which is one of the reasons I still enjoy it to this day, despite what was or wasn't a hit on this thing. But that's why this one, for me at least, is coming in at #6. All right, coming in at #5, Crystal Ball from 1976, sixth studio album, first to feature Tommy Shaw on guitar and vocals. And while no major hits really sprung from this album, I really do like the song Shoes on here. I think that's a James Young style song. Tommy's influence on here, I think, really shows through. It really helped elevate the band. It just showed what a powerhouse member he was going to be. Some of the strong songs that came off of this that were singles, Mademoiselle and the title track, Crystal Ball, all really show the power and the future of where Styx was about ready to go on those follow-up albums. But for me, it's still a favorite, and that's why it's coming in top 5. Okay. Coming in at #4, this might be a shock to some of you guys out there, maybe not for those of you that are in the know. Crash of the Crown from 2021. Yes, I do think this album is that good. It's their 17th studio album, last to feature Ricky Phillips on bass. And while not an outright concept album, there's a definite theme about taking as many different song parts as they could find at the time, putting them together into one song. So it really kept the ideas and the overall of the album flowing, because nothing gets tired or bogged down in it. Each song changes quite a bit, and it's essentially what the Beatles did on Abbey Road. So they were using the same theme and logic over there for this. And initially, I have to say, that did not appeal to me. And first few listens to the album didn't appeal to me, but it was one of those ones that ended up growing on me over time. And I have really, really enjoyed this thing. And 4 years on from the release of this, I'm still grabbing it. And I think it is one of their best albums that they have released in their entire career, despite now having different members and not having the classic lineup and all those sorts of things that most people would tend to put this album down from. I actually think has been a power to this album. It's so different, it's so unique, and it's so strong and powerful beyond all the other things that the band has done, which is the reason why it's coming in at #4 for me. All right, down to the top 3 here. So coming in at #3, Pieces of 8 from 1978. 8th studio album, another concept album about not giving up on your dreams in the pursuit of money. And I find that to be kind of interesting because the band obviously did shift more towards pop in order to have the bigger hits and things, although I do think that Dennis DeYoung wanted to go in that direction, but some of the other guys maybe giving up a little bit on their dream to go that direction and have the bigger hits when they didn't necessarily need to do that. But it does make for a nice concept as far as this album goes. It was the last album where they really had any sort of progressive leanings of things before making that transition over to the more pop-friendly world. But also on here, they've got the hard rocking duo of Blue Collar Man and Renegade on here. Two of the hardest rocking songs from the band, both Tommy Shaw style songs on here. And one of the things that brought me over to the band, those were the songs I knew first, long before I knew ballads and other things from the band. I knew those from classic rock radio. And still to this day, those songs stand up. And still to this day, this album, I believe, stands up from start to finish. It's a very, very good album and was, like I said, one of the first ones that brought me to the band. Okay, coming in at number 2, Paradise Theater from 1981, their 10th studio album and arguably most successful album. It did go all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It would go triple platinum. It's another concept album about the Chicago theater of the same name, which opened in 1928, I should say now. You know, we're getting into almost those years in the 2000s, 1928 to 1956. Ultimately being demolished, and they used that as a metaphor for the changing times in America. And that still holds up today with the overall theme of the album, and having had the big hits that it does have on it, like Best of Times, Too Much Time on My Hands, Rockin' the Paradise, Snowblind, which is a fantastic underrated song from the band. But I think it both holds up musically, lyrically, stylistically, all of those different things for it to be able to come in at number 2. All right, and the album coming in at number 1, probably no surprise to most people, The Grand Illusion from 1977, their 7th studio album, interestingly, released on the 7th day of the 7th month, July, in the year 1977. So 77. Talk about a lot of luck for this album when it came out, but it certainly seems to have helped because, in my opinion, it is their best album. All 8 songs in here worthy of being hits, but the first 6 songs alone are all standout tracks, songs that have been played live by the band many times over. And in fact, they have performed this album in its entirety live, showing you how great of an album it actually is. But this one here, timeless. It's a great album, solid from start to finish. Plenty of hits, plenty of nostalgia, plenty of other great factors, all making this the number 1 album in my ranking. All right, so there you guys go. That is my album ranking of all 18 studio albums from the band Styx. Let me know which one is your number 1 album, and maybe which one you think is the most underrated album from the band Styx. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.